Have you ever felt like you were born with a kind of vision no one else seems to possess? As if the eyes you use to see the world weren't made solely of cornea and retina, but of something older, denser. As if they were shaped to see not only what's in front of you, but also everything others hide. As if every gesture, every pause, every silence around you carries invisible messages that only you seem to decipher, creating a chasm between what's said and what's felt. This feeling starts early. Even before you know who you are, you already know you don't belong. The conversations around you sound false. Gestures seem rehearsed, and the life people call normal feels like a poorly written play, where everyone pretends to be comfortable in roles clearly not meant for them. Over time, you begin to notice that almost everything seems constructed to avoid contact with the truth. Laughter is exaggerated, compliments are exchanged as currency of convenience, and even hugs are often just tokens of affection. And it's at this point that everything starts to hurt, because you still don't have the words to describe what you feel. You can't prove it, you can't explain it. And so you begin to doubt yourself. You begin to think the flaw lies within you. You begin to hide, unaware that you are, little by little, fading away. But Carl Jung already talked about this rare kind of soul born with a gaze too sharp for comfort, too deep for the shallow, too sensitive for a dull world. He called it dangerous perception. Dangerous not because it's wrong, but because it reveals. And what it reveals frightens, destabilizes, disturbs, because those who see too much become mirrors, and mirrors reveal what people have spent their lives trying to hide from themselves. And the more you become that mirror, the more you disturb. Not because of anything you've said or done, but simply by existing. You feel the tension in the air when you walk into a room. You notice the forced smile of someone who says they're fine. You catch the hesitation in their tone of voice, the look that lingers a second too long, the body posture that says the opposite of what they say. While everyone comments on the weather, you capture the emotional climate. While they chat about trivialities, you feel the weight of what's not being said. You see the cracks in the walls others build to appear unshakable. You see the effort, the fatigue, the need to appear okay, and all of it affects you, because you know you can't do anything about it, and yet, you feel it all as if it were yours, and that isolates you. Not because you distance yourself, but because others distance themselves from you, as if your mere presence reveals what they themselves try to hide. As if you were a spotlight turned on in the middle of a theater where everyone is accustomed to the shadows. You start to hear that you're too intense, too sensitive, that you think too much, that you complicate the simple, that you should have more fun, talk less, smile more, and you try to adjust. You try to reduce the depth of your gaze, make your presence lighter, less uncomfortable. You try to imitate the gestures of others, laugh at the right moments, speak only about what is expected. But this exacts a high price: self-effacement. Because to fit into the world's mold, you must stop being who you are. You must betray your own perception. You must silence what is most true within you. Jung said that the more conscious a soul becomes, the more it suffers at first. Because seeing clearly is a gift, but it's also a burden. You see where others lie, where they sabotage themselves, where they lose themselves. And there's nothing you can do. You can't force anyone to see what they're not yet ready to see. And this creates a silent pain, that of being conscious in a world that has chosen to sleep. Because consciousness awakens discomfort, and discomfort demands change, and change demands courage. You begin to notice patterns in others, in yourself, in society. You notice how people live numb, chasing validation, accumulating distractions to avoid hearing the emptiness they carry. You observe the loneliness behind social media, the fear disguised as ambition, the insecurity disguised as self-confidence, and all of this weighs on you. It weighs on you because you feel everything, even when you don't want to. It weighs on you because you understand too much, even when you'd rather ignore it. And the more you understand, the further you distance yourself, because lucidity separates you. And separation, even when necessary, hurts. But that doesn't make you weak. It makes you rare, and above all, necessary. Jung said that those who possess this perception are like bridges between worlds, the visible and the invisible, the spoken and the unspoken, the conscious and the unconscious. You sense when someone is broken inside, even when they smile. You know when someone is about to collapse, even when they say everything is fine. And this sensitivity, as painful as it may be, is a true instrument. You become a guardian of the integrity of the invisible, an interpreter of the unspoken language of the soul. You're not strange. You're one of the few who see, one of those born with eyes focused on the subterranean realm of human existence. And that's precisely why the world seems too small for the vastness that lies within you. But seeing comes at a cost. Because when you begin to see the truth in others, it doesn't take long for you to begin to see your own. And that's when the journey begins to deepen, because there's no way to keep this gaze focused outward without, at some point, turning it inward. And when you begin to see your own shadows, you begin to understand that the world is not separate from you, that everything that bothers you out there also lives in part within you. And this is one of Jung's most profound lessons: the shadow. The part of ourselves that we reject, deny, and bury. The part we avoid looking at because we believe that, if seen, it will destroy us. But it is precisely in this part that the potential for transformation lies. True consciousness is not just seeing others, it is having the courage to see oneself. And few have this courage. Because seeing oneself without a filter is painful, but it is also liberating, because what is seen can be integrated. And what is integrated ceases to dominate us. You begin to realize that your perception didn't come to punish you. It came to awaken you, to shake you out of collective anesthesia, to show you that there's something more than the daily drama, more than the senseless rush, more than social masks. You came into the world with eyes that see in the dark, and this frightens those who live by artificial light. You no longer need to pretend you don't see. You no longer need to disguise your lucidity to be accepted by those who live by distraction. Your truth may be uncomfortable, but it is also healing. Silent healing, radical healing. Maybe that's why you feel tired, because it's not just what you live, it's what you perceive, what you carry, what you translate in silence. Your presence disturbs because it demands truth. It calls others to see themselves. And not everyone is ready for that. Not everyone wants to be seen. Because seeing demands change, and change is painful. But the pain of transformation will always be less than the pain of living a lie. But make no mistake, you are not broken. You are awake, awake in a sleeping world. And lucidity may be lonely, but it is real. And in reality, you begin to live for the first time. And when you understand this, everything changes. You begin to respect your intensity. You begin to honor your gaze. You begin to understand that the world needs souls like yours, even if you don't know it yet. Because the world's healing will come from the souls who had the courage not to lose themselves. The first part of this journey is recognizing you are not a mistake. You are an exception, a rare soul with a rare gift, living in a time where the truth still frightens. But the deeper you delve, the more you begin to realize this perception that isolates you is also what will connect you with what truly matters. It is the beginning of the path, not a punishment, a calling. And when you're ready to dive even deeper, when you're prepared to face not only what you see in others, but what you miss within yourself, then the true journey begins. A journey not of escape, but of return, back to your essence, back to your wholeness, back to what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming who you were born to be. Because if your mind has already begun to see, it's time for your heart to follow suit. And the question that remains is, are you willing to live with your eyes open, even if it means never being able to close them again? Because the next stage of this journey won't just show you how you feel about others. She'll show you why being alone, for someone like you, is sometimes the only place where the soul can breathe, where it can finally hear itself. There's a loneliness that has nothing to do with being alone. It's a loneliness that persists even when surrounded by people, even amid laughter, even among those who claim to know you. It's the kind of loneliness that arises when your soul is hungry, and all the world offers are crumbs. And this is a feeling people like you know well. Carl Jung once said that the rarest individuals are those who can no longer live on the surface. They breathe a different air. They need a different kind of nourishment. Not emotional, but existential. You feel it when someone strikes up a conversation just to fill the silence. When all anyone talks about is the weather, the traffic, what's on TV, the latest internet gossip. You smile, maybe even respond, but inside, something shuts down. Because it's not just about the topic, it's the absence of depth. It's an exchange without presence. It's a connection without soul. Maybe you've tried to fit in. You've forced yourself to laugh at empty jokes, feigned interest in topics that don't touch your essence. Maybe you've blamed yourself for being hard to please, for appearing boring, introspective, or distant. But the truth is, you're not demanding. You're honest. And your honesty doesn't allow you to feign interest where your soul finds no meaning. People like you can't stand relationships where everything needs to be filtered, where vulnerability is seen as weakness, where silence is uncomfortable. You need connections where the other person doesn't just listen to you, but hears you, where you don't have to calibrate every word to be accepted, where you don't have to reduce yourself to be loved. Jung called this the need for authenticity, the soul's drive to live without masks, to exist with wholeness. And that makes you feel out of place, because the world, for the most part, is made of masks. Social, emotional, behavioral masks. People feigning happiness while falling apart inside. People living lives they didn't choose. People collecting achievements that don't heal. And you see it all. You feel it all, sometimes in seconds, and you can no longer pretend not to notice. You start avoiding social gatherings. You start to feel exhausted after just a few hours in noisy environments filled with superficial interactions. You feel like your energy is being drained not because you dislike people, but because you love the truth too much. And truth in these places is scarce. Maybe you're thinking now about some friendships you left behind. Relationships that seemed solid but deep down were empty. People you hung out with out of habit, not connection. Conversations that never went beyond the surface. Moments when you felt more alone in someone else's presence than in your own company. And that hurts. It hurts because you want to connect, but not at any cost. Jung said that awakened souls live in constant tension between two worlds. The collective world, governed by unconsciousness, and the individual world, driven by the search for inner truth. You are between these two worlds. You can't immerse yourself in the first, but you still feel alone in the second, as if you were always in between what is and what could be, between what is expected of you and what you truly are. And this creates fatigue, a fatigue that doesn't go away with physical rest, a fatigue of the soul, because every superficial interaction seems to steal a piece of your presence. Every forced conversation, every mask you have to tolerate, every environment that demands performance rather than presence, all of it exhausts you. And yet, you persist. Because there's a longing within you for truth, for reciprocity, for depth. You don't just want to be heard, you want to be understood. You don't just want company, you want presence. And at this point, the paradox begins to emerge. The more you become aware, the more isolated you feel. Because the deeper you dive into yourself, the more you realize how rare it is to find someone willing to dive in with you. Most prefer to stay on the surface, because the surface is safer, easier, less painful, but also less real. You begin to notice that you can no longer tolerate environments you once accepted, places with too much noise and too little truth, social gatherings where everything feels repetitive, conversations where no one truly listens to each other. And then you begin to choose silence, not out of misanthropy, but out of respect for your own energy. Silence begins to become sacred, because it's in silence that you listen to yourself. It's in silence that you rebuild yourself. But silence also brings questions, and one of them is the hardest of all. Will someone ever see me as I am? Is it possible to exist in the world without needing to hide? Is there reciprocity for a soul that accepts nothing less than the truth? These questions are seeds, and as Jung taught, every seed needs darkness to germinate. It is in silence, in solitude, in doubt, that your path begins to reveal itself, and then something starts to change. You stop seeking quantity and start seeking quality. A genuine conversation is worth more than 100 empty encounters. A sincere look nourishes you more than 1,000 compliments. You begin to realize that your demands aren't fuss, they're precision. That your selectivity isn't arrogance, it's preservation. That your solitude isn't weakness, it's a filter. You begin to accept that you don't have to fit into places that aren't meant for you. That you don't need to participate in conversations that dilute your soul. That you don't need to maintain connections just to avoid feeling alone. Because the truth is, you've felt alone many times, even when you're with someone. And it's at this point that something inside you grows stronger. Because you realize that despite everything, you're still capable of feeling emotion. You're still capable of being touched by a sincere word, a genuine gesture, a genuine exchange. And this shows that despite the pain, your sensitivity is alive. Your soul is alive. Jung said that life requires courage to be lived deeply, courage to say no to what is shallow, courage to remain true to yourself even when it means being alone. And this courage begins to grow within you, slowly, silently, like a root. You begin to understand that your soul is preparing the soil for encounters that have yet to happen. That this emptiness you feel is not absence. It is space. Space for the new, for the true, for the rare. It may still take time, there may still be days of doubt, of silence, of longing for something you haven't even experienced yet. But this time is not wasted. It is building you. It is shaping your frequency. It is fine-tuning your presence. Because deep down, you no longer want just anything. You want what resonates with who you truly are. And when it comes, because it will, you will recognize it. Because it won't be loud. It won't be immediate. It will be like a silent recognition between souls who have seen each other in another depth. An encounter where time slows down, where masks fall effortlessly, where presence is enough. But for this encounter to happen, you need to be whole. You need to have the courage to remain true to your truth. You need to continue choosing depth, even when loneliness seems unbearable. Because only then will you find what can never be found on the surface. And the question that remains is, are you willing to feel a little more hungry? To one day eat something that truly nourishes you? Because the next part of this journey isn't about what you seek in others. It's about what you carry and don't yet know. There are days when you wake up feeling like you've carried the weight of the world while you sleep. Your body is whole, but your soul is exhausted. And you can't explain why. No fights have happened. No bad news has arrived. No concrete changes have occurred. And yet, you feel as if you're weathering an invisible storm. A feeling of exhaustion that comes not from what you've experienced, but from what you've silently touched. Perhaps you're beginning to understand now. It's not what happens. It's what you absorb. You're not just someone who feels a lot. You're someone who feels what others can't even name yet. Carl Jung called this participation mystique, a temporary dissolution of the boundaries between self and other, a type of empathy that isn't conscious but psychic, something that goes beyond emotion. It's fusion, a sensitive field of consciousness in which your nervous system becomes a radar for what the collective unconscious emits. You walk into a room and feel the tension before anyone says a word. You look at someone, and your body registers a sadness that even they haven't yet realized. You hear a voice, and with it you hear an energy, as if you can sense the truth behind the intonation. This isn't ordinary intuition, it's something else. It's as if the boundary between you and the world is porous, vulnerable, open, and this can be beautiful, but also brutal, because you have no filter, and without a filter you begin to experience the world as a continuous storm. How many times have you found yourself feeling sad for no apparent reason? How many times have you felt angry, tired, discouraged, and only later realized you'd spent the day with someone who was immersed in precisely those states? And the most disturbing thing, even when you realize it, you don't know how to protect yourself. You try to ignore it. You try to rationalize it. You try to convince yourself it's just a phase. But the weight remains. You become a silent accumulator of other people's emotions, like a psychic sponge. And this begins to shape your behavior. You avoid certain places, certain people, certain types of conversation, not because you judge, but because you feel too much. And feeling too much takes a heavy toll. You begin to create invisible filters. You avoid crowds. You avoid noise. You avoid the emotional chaos of others because you already have enough of it inside. You create secret rituals. You leave early, you feign fatigue, you mute messages. But deep down you know, you're just trying to protect yourself. But is all of this really yours? This is the question rarely asked, and yet it can change everything. Because maybe half of what you carry was never yours to carry. Maybe the fear that paralyzes you isn't yours. Maybe the discouragement that surrounds you wasn't born within you. And maybe, just maybe, you're trying to heal the whole world at the expense of yourself, as if by absorbing you're preventing the other from fragmenting. But what if by doing so, you're shattering yourself into 1,000 pieces? This doesn't make you weak. It makes you an alchemist. Jung knew this. He said the collective unconscious isn't just a theory. It's real. We live connected, energetically, emotionally, unconsciously. And some people, few, are born with the gift and the burden of translating this connection. People who don't ask to see, but see. They don't ask to feel, but feel. Have you ever noticed how people approach you to vent? How they tell you things they've never told anyone else? How they feel relieved just by being around you? How, after a meeting, they leave feeling lighter, and you feel heavier? This is a pattern. It's no coincidence. It's your field doing invisible work. It's your body, your listening, your silence, offering space for the other to exist without judgment. But to what extent should you continue carrying what is not yours? This is where the narrative shifts, because this sensitivity you possess can be a gift, but it can also become a prison. You need to learn to differentiate compassion from self-abandonment. Caring for others cannot mean leaving yourself empty. Feeling for others cannot mean forgetting yourself. There's a fine line between deep empathy and the dissolution of the self. And it's this line you need to learn to protect. True compassion begins at the root, yourself. Without it, it becomes sacrifice in disguise. You begin to realize that silence isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It's not that you enjoy solitude, it's that it heals you. It's in silence that you can hear yourself again. You can separate what came from outside from what arises within. Solitude for you is sacred space. It's the only place where your own frequency can be felt without interference. Place where external noise dissolves and you can finally reconnect with your own voice. But there's something even deeper going on here. Because sometimes, unconsciously, you burden yourself with other people's emotions as a way to avoid dealing with your own. When you're immersed in other people's chaos, you don't need to listen to your own emptiness. When you're saving others, you don't need to face what's fragmented within yourself. And this is a dangerous pattern, because you begin to believe your value lies in service, not in existence. Have you ever wondered why so many people trust you, but so few can offer you the same support? Maybe it's because you've spent so much time becoming the strong, the sensible, the stable one, that no one realizes how much you need to be cared for too. And when you do, you often fall silent, because you've learned that expressing your pain feels too much, and that if you allow yourself to be fragile, the entire system around you can crumble. So you swallow, you fall silent, you walk away, and smile. Jung said that people who carry the collective pain need, more than anyone else, rituals of self-return. Without these rituals, they become ill. Their bodies tire, their minds collapse, their souls crave rest, and you feel it. You feel it in your fitful sleep, in your unexplained fatigue, in your desire to disappear for a few days without telling anyone, in your eyes that have lost their luster even when life seems right. But disappearing isn't the answer. Reappearing to yourself is. Relearning how to go back inward, how to close the energetic doors after a day of exposure, how to cleanse what you've absorbed, how to return what isn't yours, how to silently say, I understand you, but I'm not responsible for carrying you. You can love someone deeply and still not be the repository of that person's pain. You need practice, not escape, but reconnection. Walk in silence. Write down what you feel. Breathe deeply before bed. Be in nature without your cell phone. Talk to those who truly see you. Clear your field. And above all, learn to say no, firmly and compassionately. Because every no you say to another is a yes you give to your integrity. You didn't come into this world to be a repository for other people's pain. You came to remind us that it's possible to transform pain into wisdom. But that starts with you. It starts by learning to recognize your limits, to recognize when you're losing yourself in an attempt to save someone else, to remember that your soul has value, even when it's not carrying anyone. And if you stop right now and listen to your body, what is it trying to tell you? How long have you been ignoring your signals, your neck tension, your chest pressure, your forgetfulness, your interrupted sleep? These are all cries for help. They're silent reminders that you need to prioritize yourself. You need to restore yourself. You need to remember that there's a soul inside you that also wants to be heard, that also needs a hug, care, a space of its own. It's not enough to understand everything. You have to feel consciously, transmute within limits, love without dissolving. Jung said that true inner work begins when we stop trying to fix the world and begin to heal our own relationship with our truth. And this work is silent, non-transferable, radically intimate. And this truth is simple. You're exhausted because you're constantly trying to sustain emotional structures that weren't made for you. You're overwhelmed because you feel even what's unsaid. You're tired because you never learned that your sensitivity needs protection. But you're learning now. You're building a new way of listening, a new presence, a new pact with yourself. But now you're learning. You're awakening, you're beginning to come back to yourself, and this return could be the most revolutionary act of your life. And the question that remains is, will you keep breaking yourself to keep others whole? Or are you ready to start rebuilding yourself? Because the next stage of this journey won't ask you to feel more. It will ask you to feel consciously. It will teach you that there's beauty in surrender, but there's power in choice, and that not every pain that crosses your path needs to stay with you. There's a silent war going on inside you. It doesn't involve screams or visible weapons, but it fragments you every day. It's a struggle between who you are and who the world needs you to appear to be, between your raw essence and the version molded to not frighten, between the intensity that pulses within and the controlled tone with which you've learned to survive. And perhaps the scariest thing about this war is that often you don't even realize you're in it. It operates in the background, disguised as responsibility, maturity, and professionalism. But each of these masks comes with a cost, the gradual loss of your wholeness. Carl Jung called this psychic splitting, a state in which the soul must fracture into multiple personas to continue existing in a world that doesn't tolerate authenticity. It's not about fakeness, it's about survival. As a child, you learned that certain parts of yourself frightened you. Your sensitivity was uncomfortable. Your depth was seen as exaggeration. Your ability to perceive what wasn't said made others uncomfortable. And little by little, you began to hide it. You began to modulate your tone of voice, to laugh at the right moment, to silence what pulsed within you. First, you silenced yourself, then you adapted, and over time you began to act. At work, you don one type of emotional armor. At home, another. With friends, yet another. Each one calibrated, edited, rehearsed. And the further you distance yourself from your center, the more your body begins to scream. Unexplained anxiety, fatigue that doesn't improve, a diffuse sadness, as if something is always out of place. Minor ailments arise, irritations increase, mood swings, and nothing seems to have a clear cause. According to WHO data, nearly 1 in 4 people today suffer from anxiety-related disorders. This isn't just a coincidence. It's a reflection of a society that demands constant performance, where even vulnerability must be aesthetically acceptable. And if you have a more awakened conscience, this scenario is even crueler, because you perceive the artificiality of everything, and you feel that to survive you must play along. You must conform to a standard that was never yours. You must accept a life where almost nothing resonates with your truth. But at what cost? Every time you adapt too much, a part of you dies silently. You begin to live in fragments, small pieces of yourself scattered across social roles, expectations, fears, obligations. Your soul begins to exhaust itself, not from excessive physical exertion, but from excessive inauthenticity. And worst of all, You begin to forget who you were before you needed to please. You forget your original dreams, your spontaneous gestures, your authentic expressions, and you become a functional caricature of yourself. Have you ever felt exhausted even on seemingly calm days? Ever wanted to disappear for a few days without needing to justify anything? Ever felt like your life seems right on the outside, but wrong on the inside? These are clear signs of internal fragmentation, and the more you ignore them, the more your body manifests them. Your mind spirals. Sleep becomes shallow. Your heart races out of nowhere. Small breakdowns become part of your routine. You start living in containment mode, functioning but not truly present. Jung said that the soul cries out for unity, that the true process of individuation begins when you decide to stop living in parts and begin to reunite all that was separated. But this process requires courage, because the first step is recognizing, yes, I've distanced myself. And that hurts, because there's no one else to blame. It's not the other. It's you who allowed it, who gave in, who remained silent. You begin to realize that the life you've built is full of compromises, that the praise you receive isn't for your true self, but for the masks you've learned to wear, that the bonds you've built are often sustained by your emotional absence. You give of yourself but aren't seen. You support but aren't nurtured. You serve but aren't celebrated. And this creates a dull, continuous pain, difficult to explain even to yourself, a kind of disembodied grief, a void that has no name. Have you ever wondered who you would be if you didn't have to please anyone? This question seems simple, but it's devastating, because in trying to answer it, you begin to realize how much you've erased yourself to be accepted, how much you've moderated your voice, how much you've edited your expression, how much you've repressed your pain, and an old anger begins to surface, not against others, but against self-abasement. You begin to realize that living to be accepted is living to die in silence. Many studies show that continued emotional repression is associated with an increase in autoimmune diseases, digestive disorders, and hormonal imbalances. The body becomes ill when the soul isn't heard, and you feel it. You feel something is wrong, even when everyone says everything is fine. And perhaps this is the greatest cry of all, the inner silence that can no longer be ignored. The silent cry of an identity that has been stifled by years of adaptation. You try to reclaim small pieces. You remember what you loved to do when you didn't have to prove anything. You remember who you were before the urge for approval. You search for memories where spontaneity still existed, and you begin to realize you haven't lost everything. There's still a spark. There's still something alive. There's still someone inside, begging to come out. But how do we put it all back together? Jung said that the return to wholeness is not done in haste, but with presence. It begins by pausing, by listening to the discomfort, by embracing the rejected parts. Sometimes you'll need to sit with your sadness and ask, what are you trying to show me? You'll have to look at your anger and recognize that it exists to remind you that you've been invaded. And you'll need to rediscover your untamed desire, the one that doesn't seek to be useful, just to be true. Because not every desire needs to justify itself. Some just need to exist. This process is slow, inconvenient, and often lonely, because the closer you get to your truth, the more you disturb those who have grown accustomed to your adapted version. Some relationships will be shaken, some cycles will be broken, but this is not a loss. It is alignment. You are not becoming difficult. You are becoming whole. And wholeness does not fit in environments where truth is seen as a threat. Have you ever felt more genuine in silence than in speaking? Perhaps it's because at many points in your life, your words were shaped to avoid hurting, to please, to maintain harmony. And in the process, you forgot the language of your soul, but it's still there. And it doesn't require you to be understood by everyone. Just that you stop betraying yourself, that you listen to yourself more than you listen to fear, that you trust the discomfort of truth more than the comfort of lies. Reuniting your fragments is a radical act. In a world that demands adaptation, being whole is a revolution. And you don't need permission to do it. You just need presence. To remember that you're not weak for feeling too much, that you're not strange for not fitting in, that you're not wrong for longing for a life with more truth, that there's a silent strength in souls that choose to live without division. You need to allow yourself to return to yourself. Choose silence over performance. Choose the discomfort of truth over the numbness of acceptance. Choose the longer path, the one that returns you to yourself. Because haste takes its toll, and the rush to please the world almost always costs you your own presence. What if all this you feel is not excess but precision? What if this pain you carry is actually your body's response saying, "I can't pretend anymore"? Because the next part of this journey isn't about the world demanding you. It's about the soul calling you back, inward to the center, to the wholeness you never lost, you just forgot how to access it. Because the world may ask you to perform, but your soul will always remind you to exist. Sometimes, all you need is a look. Not just any look, but one that penetrates. One that doesn't dwell on appearances, that doesn't seek explanations, that simply sees. When that look happens, something changes. There are no grand speeches, no promises, no effort. There's just the feeling that finally, you've been recognized. As if, for a brief instant, the universe confirmed your existence. And that moment, however rare, can mark your entire life. Carl Jung called this synchronicity. Events that, even without a causal relationship, intersect with such precision that they seem to have been stitched together by something greater. The meeting of two souls vibrating at the same frequency is not coincidence. It is a summoning. When you recognize someone and are recognized in return, it is not magic, but memory. It is as if, somewhere in the unconscious, you had already met. And now, for the first time in your conscious life, you meet again. But why are these encounters so rare? Because most people live disconnected from their own essence. And those who aren't in touch with themselves can't see others. It's like trying to tune a frequency on a broken radio. No matter how much you transmit, there's no one on the other end who receives it. And this explains the feeling of emptiness in so many interactions. It explains why you can spend hours with someone and still leave feeling more alone than when you arrived. It explains the fatigue after social gatherings, the discouragement after empty conversations, the frustration of giving of yourself and not being understood. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever wondered why you seem to always be searching for something you can't name? Have you ever looked around and thought, "Does anyone here really see me?" Have you ever had conversations where you said everything right, but felt everything wrong? Have you ever blamed yourself for not feeling nourished by connections that, theoretically, were secure? But the problem wasn't you. It was the lack of depth. It was the silence of souls while bodies moved. And then one day, it happens. You meet someone. And without knowing how to explain it, you know. You know that person sees you beyond the surface. You know you don't need to justify your intensity, nor hide your sensitivity. You know you can breathe a sigh of relief because in that realm, there's no need for pretense. It's as if the weight of years disappears for a few minutes. As if your soul says, "Thank you for finally seeing me." These encounters are rare, but they do happen. And when they do, they change everything. Because after being seen, it's impossible to settle for invisibility. After being deeply touched, the superficial becomes unbearable. After experiencing energetic reciprocity, any bond without presence dissolves on its own. It's as if your soul, upon proving what is true, develops an intolerance for lies. You begin to realize that what you called friendship was perhaps just habit, that some bonds were sustained by necessity, not affinity, that you accepted emotional scraps for fear of being alone. But now, after experiencing what it's like to be truly recognized, you can no longer accept the meager. Your soul has raised the bar, and that, yes, is true growth. But not everything is easy in this process. Because when you raise your standards, you lose things. People move away, cycles end. Previously tolerable environments become suffocating. You start saying no more often. You start choosing more. You start protecting your presence as something sacred. And the world isn't used to that. Because the world wants your yes. It wants your smile. It wants your availability. But it doesn't necessarily want your truth. You start to seem selective, unfriendly, reserved. And maybe you are, but not out of arrogance, out of love. Love for yourself. Love for what you've discovered you deserve. love for what you know is possible. Because once you've tasted the nectar of true connection, you'll never again accept the bitter taste of absence disguised as companionship. Jung said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there's a reaction, both are transformed. And you're looking for a reaction, not a distraction. You no longer want relationships where you have to be half, where you have to mince words, hide pain, calibrate emotions. You want bonds where you can be whole, where you can speak without fear, where silence is comfortable, where the soul can breathe. But what if those connections never happen again? This is the doubt that hurts, because after tasting the profound, the interval until the next encounter can feel like a desert. You start to feel even more alone, because now, beyond the absence of connections, there's the memory of what's possible. And this memory hurts. It's like feeling hungry after having tasted a dish that nourished you for the first time. But this pain also keeps you whole, because it reminds you of what's true, and it prevents you from returning to what no longer serves you. You begin to live at a different pace, slower, more selective, more present. Learning to endure the silence between one true encounter and the next becomes part of the journey. You begin to trust that when the time is right, new connections will come. And until they come, you sustain yourself. Because now you know being alone is less painful than being with someone and still feeling lonely. You begin to create space. Emotional space, mental space, energetic space. You stop filling your time with anything. You stop forcing yourself to get close. You stop trying to please. And in that space, something begins to blossom. A deeper presence, a sparkle in your eyes, a lightness in your breathing. Your soul begins to return to your body. You become, without realizing it, the kind of person you were searching for. Someone who doesn't demand but inspires. Who doesn't convince, but reveals. Who doesn't invade, but welcomes. And that changes everything. Because now, true encounters begin to happen more frequently. And not by coincidence, but by coherence. Your frequency has shifted, and what you attract now is a reflection of who you have become. And then it all makes sense. The silences, the losses, the pain, the lonely nights. Everything was preparation, because without it, you wouldn't have listened to your soul. You wouldn't have refined your listening. You wouldn't have learned to recognize what's real. Everything that seemed like absence was, in fact, cleansing. A space being created so that the real could arrive. And when it arrives, you recognize it. You don't need proof. You don't need certainties. Your body relaxes. Your mind becomes silent. And your soul smiles. Because finally, someone sees. And this seeing isn't about appearance. It's about essence, about frequency, about that which no words can explain. The question now is no longer whether you will be recognized, but whether you are ready to recognize yourself. Because the other person also carries layers. They are also afraid. They have also been hurt. And true recognition only happens when both are willing to see, but also to be seen, to find, but also to offer themselves. Carl Jung said that the process of individuation inevitably leads us to the other, that it is impossible to become whole without entering into relationship, and that true connections are those that don't complete, but reveal. They don't distract, but deepen. They don't fulfill, but expand. And maybe that's what you've been looking for all along. Not someone to save you, but someone to see you. Not someone to distract you, but someone to walk alongside you. Not someone to tell you what to do, but someone to remind you of who you are. And to find that, you first had to lose yourself, empty yourself, fragment yourself, to now, little by little, reunite. Because the next part of this journey won't be about reconnecting with others. It will be about reconnecting with something even rarer, your own presence before those who have the courage to remain. You spent your entire life feeling like you carried something you couldn't name, a kind of silent mission, as if there were a hidden motive behind your sensitivity, your lucidity, your deep pain in the face of superficiality. From a very young age, you perceived the world more intensely than others. Words pierced you more deeply, looks marked you more powerfully, silence spoke to you more than speeches. And for years you tried to adjust, to fit in, to silence yourself. You tried to become functional. You tried to settle for what was expected, but you couldn't. Because deep down you knew there was something in you that didn't fit in, not by default, but by design. Jung said that those who carry the call of individuation feel, from an early age, that they have come for something that is not small, something that is not limited to career, goals, or routine, something that cannot be explained, only experienced. And now, after everything you've seen, heard, and felt, you begin to remember. You came to see what others ignore, to feel what others block, to say what others dare not, to be what others fear to be. And there is no turning back. You can no longer hide from what you know. You can no longer deny your own intensity. It pulses, pushes you, demands you. And this demand does not come from the ego. It comes from the soul. It comes from the most honest place there is. But how can you live this in a world that demands the opposite? That's the paradox. And this is where your journey transforms. Because you're no longer in a place of doubt. You now know who you are. You know what you feel. You know what you need. The question has changed. It's no longer, why am I like this? But rather, what am I going to do with all this? And this is the question that separates those who remain asleep from those who wake up. Because knowing you're rare isn't enough. You have to live as someone who knows this. You have to act, choose, let go, rebuild. You have to commit to your own lucidity. But how can you make this awareness practical? How can you transform everything you've absorbed here into concrete action? The answer begins with presence. The first task of your journey is to be where your feet are. Return to yourself daily. Create spaces, however brief, where you can listen to your own soul without external interference. This can be as simple as 5 minutes of silence at the beginning of the day. It can be walking without music, writing without a filter, taking a deep breath before responding. It can be drinking coffee alone, gazing at the sky. It can be putting your phone aside and simply existing for a few moments. Presence is not a luxury. It is foundation. It is urgency. Next comes alignment. You need to honestly observe everything around you, your routine, your connections, your environment. How many of these things reflect your truth? How many have been held on to out of fear, convenience, or fatigue? You don't need to change everything at once, but you need to start. Choose an area of your life where your truth is missing and commit to bringing it back. Maybe it's a habit, a project, a relationship, a space. Bring your presence back to where it was taken away. Bring your gaze, your intention, your truth. Next comes positioning. This means learning to say no. Learning to disappoint responsibly. Learning not to justify what your soul feels. The world isn't used to people who live in coherence. And that's why you need to be one. Because your presence, when true, is a silent reminder that another way of living is possible, even if it hurts, even if it pushes you away, even if it takes time, and even if you yourself doubt it sometimes. Still, remain in the truth. But there's something even deeper. You need to serve. Not in the common sense of blindly serving others, but of channeling your intensity towards something greater. Jung said that every process of individuation leads to the recognition of the collective. You don't awaken just for yourself. You awaken to remind others that they can awaken too. Your gaze, your listening, your art, your writing, your silence, all of this is a bridge. All of this is service. And service here means coherence. It means living so deeply within yourself that your mere presence changes the field around you. You are a vibrational field, and your field influences more than your words. This takes courage, because living consciously in an unconscious world is like walking against a crowd. You will be judged, misunderstood, rejected, but you will also be remembered. You will become a beacon, a reference, an anchor for those who are still lost. And little by little, quietly, you will create a new frequency, a new vibration, a new realm around you, a realm where truth is not a luxury, it is home, a realm where intensity is language, where sensitivity is direction, where the soul can breathe. And the most beautiful thing? You'll start attracting your own, people who also feel too much, who have also seen too much, who have also spent years adapting, but now they are awakening. And when you meet, something changes, not just between you, but in the world. Because two awakened souls together are a field of healing. And that's how transformation begins. Not with crowds, but with individuals who have decided to live without betraying themselves. And this silent healing is the most powerful revolution of all. You've seen it, you've felt it, you know it. Now it's time to decide. Decide that your truth will no longer be postponed, that your intensity will no longer be hidden, that your sensitivity will no longer be treated as weakness. That you will, each day, place your soul at the center of your life. This doesn't mean abandoning everything. It means realigning, revisiting, refining. It means stopping going on autopilot and starting to live with intention. It means accepting, once and for all, that your existence will not be shaped by the expectations of others, but by the inner direction that only you feel. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take the next step. Choose a daily practice that reconnects you. Choose a relationship that needs healing or ending. Choose a truth you need to start living. And start today, not tomorrow, not when you have time. Today, because your soul has waited too long, and your soul is tired of waiting. It wants to breathe, it wants to live, and when you forget, because you will, come back here, come back to this video, come back to this reminder, because that's what we do here. We remember, we sustain each other, we strengthen each other, we remind ourselves of what the world has taught us to forget, and that's already healing, that's already a path, that's already a return. This is the purpose of the Seek Profunda channel. Here, you are not too much. Here, your pain has a place. Your intensity is welcome, your lucidity is respected. Here, you find a space where you can exist without diminishing yourself, where you can be seen without needing to explain yourself, where you can walk alongside others who have also chosen to awaken, where your journey no longer needs to be solitary, where you are finally welcomed. If this video spoke to you, then it was made for you. Like this video, not just for support, but as an affirmation of what you feel. Subscribe to the Deep Psyche channel to continue this journey with us. Here, every week, we dive even deeper. And if you'd like, share your story in the comments, even anonymously. Because when you express yourself, you heal. And when someone reads it, they recognize themselves. And when someone recognizes themselves, they rebuild themselves. This journey isn't easy, but it's real. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're ready for it. You're not alone. You never have been. And now, finally, you know it. Welcome to the beginning of your life with open eyes. Welcome to your mission. Welcome to the depths of your own existence. And may this be just the beginning.